Welcome to Voices in Action, a new podcast by the Eastern Oregon Center for Independent Living about disability in Oregon. I'm your host, Leo Alanak. Over the course of this first season, we'll cover a variety of topics related to disability justice education, speak with leaders of local advocacy organizations, and learn from one another in the process. This week will be the second episode in an ongoing exploration of policing and prison abolition as it relates to disability justice. A major component of the prison industrial complex is the issue of reentry after being released. People struggle to find employment, housing, and access to resources that can help them get back on their feet, as the stigma of being formerly incarcerated creates many barriers. Not to mention that socioeconomic inequality, lack of access to mental health care, and systemic oppression most likely led to their imprisonment in the first place. In the book Captive Genders, a chapter written by Janetta Louise Johnson and Toshio Moronic explain, quote, "Most people will come out of prison with some of the same psychological issues as soldiers coming back from war, with a form of post-traumatic stress disorder that is the result of being in one of the most stressful environments human civilization has ever produced. Suicide attempts are common, and about half of prisoners go in with some kind of mental illness, illnesses that are nearly impossible to treat in a setting designed not to rehabilitate, but to dehumanize and separate." As Angela Davis writes, quote, "Jails and prisons are designed to break human beings, to convert the population into specimens in a zoo, obedient to our keepers but dangerous to each other." End quote. There's an innate fear of others, which is brought on by being a target of physical violence and sexual assault at the hands of correctional officers and other prisoners. Reporting these assaults can elicit retaliation, including time in solitary confinement, which is justified by prison administrators as a safety measure. Anxiety also comes from being trapped in small spaces. A typical prison cell measures about 6 feet by 8 feet. Privacy is non-existent, as any minute could bring a surprise search of a person's cell. Prison overcrowding, while too often used as an excuse for developers to pitch lucrative prison expansion projects, is an added health concern, as many prisons across the country hold twice the number of people they were designed to house. Then there's the difficulty of getting over a life so programmed, so regimented, that free choice about everything from clothing to personal hygiene is gone. After getting out, even decisions about the inconsequential things in life, what to have for lunch, for example, are difficult because people are not used to having a say. The longer the sentence, the worse the problem becomes. Panic attacks are common for people who have been in custody for years. Many ex-prisoners report not being able to go near windows because they've been conditioned not to. There are rules against touching windows behind bars. Some might fear the simple act of going outside and interacting with strangers because they've been programmed to believe there's no good in humanity. Going outside when the sun is down is an even scarier thought because, as prisoners, they spent virtually no time outside at night. People inside quickly learn that the only way they might have a chance of being paroled or even taking classes, such as GED courses, is to internalize the logic that no matter what they are incarcerated for, they alone are to blame for their imprisonment. In prison, which is a space of psychic warfare, it's hard not to start believing and reproducing this atonement narrative. Follow the rules, however unfair and dehumanizing they might be, and exhibit visible self-loathing, and administrators might reward you with an early release. Internalizing the parole board's idea of redemption is a disaster for the psyche, but it's not just the mental torture that continues to haunt people. In so many concrete and tangible ways, the prison's shadow looms. Inside, most prisoners work to pass the time, to make a little bit of cash to use for the commissary or to pay restitution. Prisoners have been or are responsible for the manufacture of the bulletproof vests worn by the military, the sofas furnishing state capitol buildings, even items for private corporations, such as certain pieces of lingerie at Victoria's Secret. In effect, prisons have become state-sponsored sweatshops, complete with an entirely captive labor force. This in turn causes a person's sense of self-worth to slip away, and so once out of prison, abuse on the job feels expected and strangely normal. The vast majority of prisoners are poor going in. With minimal savings from their labor in prison, ex-prisoners need help from social services, but getting access to even the basics like food are a battle. Federal and state bans on food stamps for ex-prisoners means restricted access to even the bare-bones meals that government, quote, nutritional assistance, end quote, programs will cover. Obamacare or not, in many states it's impossible to find insurance that will cover necessities. Formerly incarcerated people are often barred from public housing programs. Plenty of ex-prisoners find themselves having to self-medicate to deal with all-consuming memories of the psychological and sexual abuse they experienced inside, and drug rehab programs are usually limited to those who can afford them, ironically depriving some of the people who need them the most. Even the free services that are available aren't altogether free considering what they involve. Usually there are hoops people have to jump through in order to get accepted into programs, and there's usually a limited time frame that a person is able to utilize them. These hoops and time limits might make accessing the services not worth the trouble, even more so when a long waiting list is added into the mix. In prison, people are under constant surveillance. Outside, instead of prison guards, they're watched by probation officers and social workers who aren't always on their side. Parole and probation entails so many rules that it's difficult to keep up, and people's lives can be regimented in ways that feel eerily similar to being back behind bars. They might be stuck in a small area, barred from traveling too far from their home base. The outside world that held so much promise becomes a huge roofless prison cell. Being stuck in the neighborhood where they lived before prison can easily lead people to get back into the same things that got them locked up in the first place. And simple things like being late to a probation meeting can have serious consequences, including more prison time. Within all this, there's also an opportunity to make new connections between growing movements for justice for imprisoned people and disabled people, and not only because there's so much overlap in these communities. As disability justice activist Mia Mingus writes, quote, "With disability justice, we want to move away from the myth of independence, that everyone can and should be able to do everything on their own. I am not fighting for independence as much of the disability rights movement rallies behind. I am fighting for an interdependence that embraces need and tells the truth. No one does it on their own, and the myth of independence is just that, a myth," end quote. In the anti-prison struggle, interdependence that embraces need is crucial. It's going to take everyone's collective energy to help our people who are just coming out to start touching windows again, to abolish the systems that are causing the trauma, and to make something healing and new in their place, end quote. In this episode, I spoke with April Cox and Kimberly Mansfield of the DeMunez Resource Center and Legal Clinic in Salem, a nonprofit that is unique to Oregon outside of large progressive cities such as Portland and Eugene.
So my name is April Cox. I am the director of the DeMunez Resource Center, and we are part of Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action in Salem. The agency serves Polk County and Marion County. Our program is a little bit more specific to Marion County at the moment anyway.
So what is the DeMunez Resource Center?
So the DeMunez Resource Center, it's kind of a one-stop shop for reentry clients. And reentry clients are really anybody who has a criminal conviction in their past. So the primary clients that we serve are either currently incarcerated, recently released from incarceration, or at least on supervision, so parole or probation in Marion County. But we do have some clients that haven't been in the system for a long time, but they still come out and utilize our resources.
So what kind of resources do you offer?
Our setup as a one-stop shop is that we accept walk-ins. So anybody needing resources, our hours are 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. So anybody can walk in and sit down and meet with the staff. We also schedule appointments a little bit more so because of the pandemic, but that's always an option too if someone has a very targeted need. But yeah, so our services, we do a lot of employment services. So we have an employment specialist on site who is also, we have some specialized grants for employment. So we are sitting down with people, helping them write resumes, practicing mock interviews. Our employment specialist has done a great job of making connections with employers in our community. So we already have a bit of a pipeline to, employers that are currently hiring that are open to working with our clients, and they understand that they have a criminal record and that they may be on probation or parole and that their schedules need to be flexible and kind of the needs that some of those people have. So someone can come in, we can make a resume, we've got job leads, we sometimes can make direct connections with employers. We also have some support service money where we can help people pay for specialized tools, work gear that they may need for the job. We have access to some good training programs and we can help them pay for those training programs. A good example of that that's pretty common is like a flagging certificate. And we also just have a lot of support and advocacy too. So we can really advise clients on how to talk about their criminal record in a job interview. Some of those things that may be tricky if they have a lot of work history, that's work history while they were in like Department of Corrections. We have ways to kind of format resumes for that. So that's kind of the employment services, which I would say it's about 50% of the services that clients seek out from us. We also can help pay for their ID, driver's license, bus passes, gas vouchers, things like that. So really just trying to look at what barriers they may face and find solutions to help them with that so they can get hired and then maintain the employment. But aside from the employment, we have a lot of cognitive programming. We have one of our navigators. He is a very talented facilitator. So he does a lot of group facilitation, which includes parenting classes. If they complete all of the sessions of the parenting class, they actually get a certificate that's recognized by DHS. So that certificate can help them potentially, get privileges back to have visits with their kids or, eventually down the road, maybe custody. And our class is free. So normally those classes, it's a 24 session class, 2 hours a session. They normally would cost money, but we offer it for free. And then he also does a lot of skill building classes. So problem solving, maximizing strengths, pro-social activities, and then some, there we have like a mindfulness class, journaling. So something that isn't quite as evidence-based practices, but something that a lot of people really tend to enjoy, and it'll help them with kind of daily management. So we do the classes, the employment, and then just general navigation. So we help people troubleshoot what's going on, help them figure out those solutions. We are a resource center, so a lot of people are trying to get connected with treatment. The majority of our clients do have, substance abuse issues or some mental health needs that probably haven't been addressed yet. So we are helping them get connected to those resources that are local. We have an Oregon Health Plan sign up clinic here every Friday. So anyone can come in every Friday and actually get signed up for OHP. This is a really important benefit for our incarcerated clients because most of the time their OHP gets turned off once they're incarcerated again. They can actually get enrolled in the Oregon Health Plan prior to their release, usually when they're within 5 days or so of release, they can get the status turned back on right away. So there's no gap. So we have that going on. And then the legal clinic services. So Kimberly works with our clients pretty closely. So the clients are eligible for free legal services as long as they are considered reentry. So they have a criminal conviction, and she helps them with civil matters. So a lot of our clients get that help with custody, family court stuff, bankruptcy, tenant law. And actually, so our office does all of the scheduling and coordinating. And before COVID, she actually came out here every week. So it was a really nice way for clients to really, sit with her and get to know her and, work with that. But that's kind of the gist. We have a lot of, we're doing some new things. We have a newer staff that's doing a health and wellness class that's focusing on just the importance of diet, nutrition, exercise, some mental health stuff. And then really new to our center is we actually got some grant funding for housing navigators. So just this week, just today, actually, our first housing navigator started. We have another one starting soon. So we're really excited about that. One of the primary needs that our clients always have is housing, and it's not been something that we've been able to do a lot of with them. So it's really exciting that we now have that. We'll have 2 staff that are really, they're housing navigators, but they're case managers. They're going to spend some time doing landlord outreach. So they're going to go meet with landlords, talk to landlords about our clients and their needs, and to really try to educate landlords on reentry and the struggles that our clients face and get some more opportunities for them. And the housing navigators are going to serve as case managers. So they'll definitely be there to try to wrap services resources around the clients to make them successful once they are housed. And both of those grants do have a decent budget for client services. So we'll actually have the ability to help clients pay for first month's rent, deposit, move-in costs, and maybe even if they have some rent that they owe from a previous residence, we may be able to help them with some of that too. It's exciting.
How do people get connected with your services then? How does that happen?
Yeah, so we are located on the campus of the Marion County Sheriff's Office campus/jail. So clients, so we do a lot. We're doing outreach work at the jail. We work closely with the probation and parole officers, and we're all on the same campus. So we get a lot of referrals from the POs, walk-ins from the jail once they're released. They come over, and then we work really closely with the transition center, which is also known as the work center. So we actually are able to go into the dorms, grab those people, bring them over to our center. We have a computer lab, and then all the classes and everything are available to them. So that's kind of how we get the majority of our referrals. We also, we have a Facebook account that we're active on and trying to put more content out there. The agency website has improved. So yeah, that's the majority of our clients. And we also have a lot of community partners in the area. So like WorkSource Oregon, that's a big one for us. So there's a lot of community partners that we all know what each other does. So if they have clients that could benefit from our services, they send them our way too.
So what are the demographics of those that you work with? Disabilities, socioeconomic status, race. I'm not sure if you collect information on any of that.
Yeah, definitely. So I pulled demographics off of the last calendar year for the clients we served. And the last year, obviously, was kind of interesting with everything going on. So I've got, this is all direct client reporting. 72% of our clients are males, 28% females. 76% identified as white, 35% identified as Hispanic, Latino ethnicity, and then 19% either didn't report or marked other race.
According to the 2020 census, the demographics of Marion County break down to 88% identifying as white and 27% identifying as Hispanic/Latino, suggesting that there is a racial disparity within the prison system, which is supported by historical and national data.
One thing that's kind of interesting is 63% of our clients identified as being parents of minor children. The majority of our clients have little kiddos out there. And then as far as housing, 36% reported being homeless, 35% reported temporarily residing with a relative or friend. So I think that that's interesting because temporary is kind of the big part to take from that. So that's putting us at about 70% of our clients don't have stable housing. As far as like socioeconomic status, almost all of our clients qualify for OHP and food stamps and the benefits. So that kind of gives you an idea about that. And we don't actually collect information on disability status, but the large majority of our clients do have struggles with mental health, with maybe physical disabilities. There's a pretty wide range, and we see a lot of clients that are trying to pursue applying for disability. So we have some resources that we can help them with that, but we don't collect that information specifically, but there's definitely a lot of barriers for our clients.
So what are some misconceptions about your work that you frequently run into?
There's like misconceptions that I think the public has, and then maybe misconceptions that the clients might have. And there's definitely some overlap. So misconceptions for the public or people that aren't that familiar with our center. I think one common one that I get is that they just assume because, we serve clients that have criminal convictions that our center is unsafe or chaotic. And it's actually the complete opposite. Our center is very calm. It's very organized. We really hardly ever have any issues with clients, especially the incarcerated ones. It really never happens. Everyone it's kind of a privilege to be here for them, and they have access to computers and people that are helping them, and they're getting things done. And so I think that that's a common misconception from just the general public. There's also misconceptions about the work that we're actually able to do versus just the fact that we are a resource referral center. So so I think some people think that, our clients, like that we're actually able to, just automatically get them jobs and things like that. And while we have some good job leads, I mean, it's always on the client to do the work and to take the initiative. And our staff, we're here to help and support them, but nothing is automatic. And it's the same with treatment. We don't have therapists on site, unfortunately. We just have good relationships with community providers. And so we can help streamline the process for clients. But at the end of the day, we are a resource referral center. So that I think we run into a lot with just thinking that we have the ability to really get people in these specific situations when in actuality we're here to help them, but we also rely on the experts in the community for a lot of things too. If they're the experts, then there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. So we just have the warm handoffs and the direct connections and hopefully streamline the process for our clients. I would say another misconception is that our center exists to maybe check a box, so to speak. And that's really not the case. Everybody, I mean, you see it a lot with nonprofits, but everybody really, all of my staff really have, they have a personal investment in helping individuals that have been incarcerated. Everybody is very passionate about it. We have really great success stories. Nobody feels like they come to work just to meet status quo. Everybody's really passionate and engaged, and I'm fortunate to have such a great group of staff, but everybody really has their own specialty areas and everybody really is very motivated to help. We've heard like people view it as kind of a fruitless cause, that they assume that we just have the same people coming in and out of jail all the time that we're seeing. And again, really not the case. Just ran some data. So we've been operating for over 10 years now, and we've served over 7,500 individual clients. So it's definitely not the case that it's just the same people going through and there's never progress happening. We have a lot of great success stories from our clients that have done great things since being released. And even though we would like to see them and stay in contact, normally when they're doing well, we just don't hear that much from them because they don't need our services anymore. But yeah, we definitely have a large variety and people go on to do great things.
Yeah. So what do you wish more people knew about your work, either on a social level or a legislative level?
Trying to educate people about reentry. It's always a little challenging because it's not, when we're talking about people donating money or, employers taking chances, our clientele is maybe not viewed as the most desirable to donate money to help. It's not, saving animals or saving the children or something that's more, PC, I guess. The way that we like to frame it is that, the work that we're doing, it really is to rebuild lives, promote community safety, and save taxpayer money.
Those who are concerned about saving taxpayer money on reentry services should look at how much is spent by the federal government on incarcerating people instead of providing social programs and infrastructure in the first place. According to prisonpolicy.org, the U.S. spends a total of $80.7 billion on public prisons and jails. Around 4,000 companies profit from mass incarceration, and the average daily wage of incarcerated workers is 86 cents. In short, those incarcerated aren't the cost to society, prisons are.
Our program helps to reduce crime and recidivism rates. And really, I just hope people just think about that everybody deserves a second chance. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's made mistakes. And also to think about that putting people in jail really doesn't solve any problems for anyone. Over 95% of people that are incarcerated in the United States are going to be released at some point. So we really try to send the message that, these individuals, they're going to live in your town. They could be your neighbors. So to try to change the mindset a little bit and, see everyone as very human and that we want to live in a safe community. We want to save taxpayers money. And by investing in programs like this, that's going to help keep more people out of jail and going back. And everybody has the opportunity to be more of a productive member of society. And if they have these resources, and if clients are homeless and struggling with addiction or mental health issues, it's really hard for them to, be what everybody expects, and they just need some support. And I don't think that the average person probably really understands the barriers that the clients face, especially if they've been incarcerated in prison for a while. The majority of those clients are coming out and they often don't have anything. There's no housing, there's no transportation, they don't have IDs, their family relationships are strained, pro-social activities, which is such a strange term, but just having those positive, healthy activities. A lot of people just don't have any of that. So we do outreach to all of the prisons in Oregon, and we get a list. And if they're going to be discharged to Marion County ahead of their release, we send them a letter and a brochure and invite them to come, because we're a good place to kind of get started. And most of them are going to have a PO, so we can get them connected with that and get them started. But a lot of those people come out and they literally have nothing. So I just think that the public perception of sometimes it seems like the easy solution is just to throw people in jail, but it's not solving any problems. And the longer that they're, incarcerated, the harder it is for them to get back out and get started again. And hopefully people will look at it a little differently and look at it as helping programs like this and encouraging more programs like this is really an investment in their community. And it makes everybody safer, it makes the community safer, and reduces taxpayer expenses.
If you're comfortable sharing, how did you get started in this work?
When I was in my undergrad, I was interested in psychology, and I started working for a nonprofit where I worked with kids and juveniles that were involved in the system and did some different things there. So that was kind of my exposure to the criminal justice system and working with families and just seeing how much families, you're not really just working with the kid that's on probation, but you're working with their entire family, and you see the effects of the criminal justice system on the family. And, seeing that was definitely made me want to kind of be a part of the solution, and always had more of an interest in not the incarceration side, but, probation and doing those programs that help people be in the community while still, maintaining their commitments to the system. So kind of got started there. Like I said, I worked for a nonprofit, did some different things. While I was in my undergrad, I did an internship with adult drug court, which was really interesting, a different element of the system. Drug court's a really tough program. So anybody that successfully completes that program, my hat is off to them, because those programs are intense. And then I did an internship with federal probation. So got to see different levels on county, state, and then federal. Got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I was a probation officer in a different state for a couple of years. And I just really have always believed that people deserve second chances. And I've seen just kind of the fallout from being involved in the system, and just always had a pretty strong desire to help people. And I decided to go to grad school. And so I did that and got a master's degree in nonprofit management. It's been really awesome. Oregon's doing a lot of really great things in the direction of reentry and making lives better for people that have been incarcerated.
I know we've kind of covered this a little bit, but if you wanted to, I don't know if there's more that you wanted to say on some common and harmful misconceptions you come across regarding the community members that you help.
Because of our unique relationship with the sheriff's office and our location, so we are located on the jail campus. So clients sometimes like to assume that we are the cops too, and we're very much not. We respect our community partners with the sheriff's office. We have good relationships with them, but we really are a nonprofit, and our philosophies are that of the nonprofit. And so that's always a common misconception. Usually once clients actually get to know us and kind of see how things are, they understand it. But I think a snap judgment is that, we're just an extension of the sheriff's office.
So what is the biggest struggle then in your day-to-day work?
Well, I would say, funding is always challenging. Most grant funding really doesn't want to support just ongoing costs. Most grant funding wants to add new elements to your program. So just kind of having the baseline general funding is always a bit of a struggle. And then grant funding, grants come and go. So there's always just a lot of things changing. And so that's always a struggle, just to have the consistency. I mean, we've definitely, we're getting there and we're adding new elements. And I think, like I said, the perception about like donating money to a program like ours to where we're helping reentry clients, that's tough. Doing more things like this, public speaking, presenting the program, I think is really important because there are a lot of misconceptions about the population we work with. That's always something that we run into. And as far as like struggles for the clients, things that we wish we could help them with more. I mean, obviously everything is so expensive now, especially housing. So it's really hard when the majority of our clients, the jobs they're going to be able to get right away are going to be pretty close to minimum wage. And so, the clients just really struggle with finding affordable housing, finding landlords that are willing to take them, being able to work for an employer that's flexible enough that they allow them to have time off to meet with their PO. And so those are some things that our clients struggle with, and we do the best we can for them, but it's definitely always a challenge.
How can people support the Demunez Resource Center or learn more about your work?
So we do take volunteers. We have volunteers that come in and run Narcotics Anonymous meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. We have volunteers in the past that have come in and done GED tutoring. So there's always opportunities to volunteer. ESL would be another need that we have. So definitely there's always opportunities to volunteer. Even just having people that are interested in, maybe coming in and, doing how to cook on a budget, some of those life skills, a lot of our clients are pretty interested in that. And some of them, don't have those things down. So lots of volunteer opportunities. You can go to our agency website page to learn more. Like I said, our Facebook page is a little bit more active and we're putting more content out there. There's links to donate money on the agency website. Another page to view would be the Marion County Reentry Initiative page. So we are a part of a community collaboration for this reentry initiative. So there's some information on there and some data and talks about some of the other partners and what they do. So we were only really remote for maybe 2 months. We're just in limited capacity, but we're pretty much back up to a normal capacity. So yeah, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5.
Next, I spoke with Kimberly Mansfield of the Demunez Legal Clinic.
Hi, I am Kimberly Mansfield. I am the director at the Demunez Legal Clinic in Salem, Oregon, and I'm the co-founder of that legal clinic. I founded that with the former retired Chief Justice Paul Demunez in 2013. That was during my last semester of law school. And so we just turned 8 a few months ago. We're now a standalone 501c3. We're our own nonprofit, and we work in conjunction with the Demunez Reentry Resource Center, also aptly named for its founder, Paul Demunez. And I went to law school in Salem, but I kind of lived all over the country in between growing up in Oregon and moving about on my own, and then decided to come back out here, finish my undergrad, and go to law school. So I had a couple of careers before I happened into the law, and I went into the law not really knowing what I would do when I got out, but that it would be working with like-minded people, and that it would have more to do with that than it would the discrete direction or area of law I went into. So it happened that I met Justice Demunez on the Portland State campus before I came to Willamette. He was very facilitative in me coming to law school at Willamette. And then I clerked for him at the Supreme Court, Oregon Supreme Court, through law school. And then we still maintain this venture. And now I'm proud that he is not only my mentor, but family, really.
So what is a legal clinic exactly?
Well, I can tell you about our legal clinic, and I will go so far as to say I think it's not a typical clinic model. We work very differently. We certainly work differently than a conventional firm model. So our legal clinic is set up that we're a very small shop. So we have attorneys would be the foundation of that. And then we use law students on internship or externship basis. They might be uncredited externships or just volunteering. And they do a lot of the legwork and a lot of the research and get to participate in cases and client interviews and intake and screening. And then they also interact with if we had a triangle, it would go from the foundation, and then we have the students. And then at the top, we have what we call our conferring attorneys in the community. And those are a few attorneys who we've just developed a personal rapport with, who have agreed to volunteer their time to us as we need it. And that means that they have an area of expertise outside of our immediate areas of expertise that we can rely on. Say, if I had someone come for, well, I do some landlord tenant law, but if there was a landlord tenant specific inquiry, I might field that out to one of our civil legal attorneys in the community. The law students would take the information, work up the case, and then interface with the volunteering attorneys. And that minimizes their time and allows them to continue to be involved and contribute to our time. And then it just expands what we're able to bring back to the client. So it's very different. It's not like a firm or even some legal clinics where they just bring in a case and we take a case and we open a file and run with it. We really come alongside people in our model, and reentry revolves around personal responsibility. So a core tenet of reentry, and these are people reentering society from arrests or convictions, any sort of background in criminal history, but there's a lot of personal responsibility involved. So we expect clients to step up, and we are a small shop, so they have to understand that our resources are limited. We meet them where they're at and try to really coach them along and support them in whatever ways we can. Sometimes we do go to court if that's where a case heads and it's really necessary. But oftentimes we're able to really come alongside people and expand their capacity and really, spur some self-advocacy and ownership and personal responsibility. And of course, with the goal that spills over into other areas of their lives. So we like to say that we are improving the fabric of society one second chance at a time, because we do think that we're improving the social capital as well.
So what kind of services does your clinic provide?
Our umbrella is that we provide civil legal services to individuals with arrests and convictions. We call them people with a past. And civil legal services, they emphasize that, as opposed to direct criminal defense services. So you could say that all of our clients have been criminally involved, but we're not involved in their criminal cases. So this is after people get out in reentry. It's not a level playing field. There are a lot of social sanctions that follow people after they've, quote unquote, paid their debt to society through either incarceration or probation or some sort of community corrections. And so they come out and there's real barriers. Things come up. I mean, right off the top, jobs, housing. When they come out, they may need a driver's license. About half of them won't have or more than half won't have a driver's license. They have family reunifications that may need made. They may need to see if they can reapply for occupational licensing, or that may be barred for them and they have to change fields and retrain. They come out with debt and they face generally probation fees that are adding onto their debt. So it kind of goes out in pretty much every direction you can imagine. There's a collateral consequence there and social sanctions. And there may be community lists of who lives where, or, sex offender registry, that sorts of things. It reaches in pretty much as broadly as you can imagine. It comes back. The sentence doesn't end when they walk of whatever community corrections they were in.
What are some misconceptions about the structure of the legal system that you frequently run into?
I think one of the biggest is a really overarching principle behind incarceration or, any sort of criminal sanction. And that is the founding fathers in our country did not intend a retributive system, meaning where we retaliated against the individuals. It was prisons, jails, probation, whatever. They're not designed to punish. That's not the job of the legal system. The loss of liberty is the punishment. So I think there's a huge, and that's really the underpinning of so many decisions, personally, politically, all sorts of things that happen, is that we don't understand that our founding fathers intended a system of rehabilitation and redemption and not retribution. But we have a fairly retributive outlook, I guess. And that's a general statement, of course, but the system also is that way. And then that rolls right into the social sanctions. And I have to say that probably the biggest mover in why I do this work is because, and I will speak for myself, but if I were judged on my worst moment, you and me probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation right now. And I think that goes for pretty much any group I might sit in front of. And we all might squirm in our chair a little bit, not exactly pipe up with those things. But that's really at the heart of the deal, that this is about redemption and second chances. And we've all gotten those in different forms at different times. So I think that lack of understanding underpins a lot of things that go on.
To expand on Kimberly's answer, we must look at the intentional development of the prison industrial complex, as well as the major role that the end of slavery plays into its use within our capitalistic economic system. Criminalizing Blackness and many other social issues that come with being oppressed, poverty, homelessness, substance abuse, was a way to shapeshift control over Black communities after the end of slavery. Laws that enforced racial segregation, Jim Crow laws, were another huge part of this, enforcing the police's role as agents in keeping white supremacy in place. Once in prison, people were, and are, forced to work for little to no pay, as according to the 13th Amendment, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction. It's important to remember that prisons are functioning exactly how they were meant to, and that's the problem. Incarcerating people does not keep communities safer or help people struggling with problems ranging from poverty to mental health crises to addiction. Policing, and by extent the U.S.'s system of mass incarceration, has always served as a way to keep control of marginalized populations, not a way to genuinely achieve justice or long-term solutions. If we are to frame this issue of prejudice against incarcerated folks, at least partially, as one of judging people on their worst moment, we must also voice the social and historical oppression that pushes them into prisons. While we are all responsible for our own actions, the power of something like white supremacy and the prison industrial complex cannot be overstated. Think of it this way. In the 1960s, corporations began to shift blame for pollution and global warming onto individuals, to create a distracting system that currently has abled people creating straw bans that actively harm disabled people who need disposable straws, instead of collectively fighting the 100 companies responsible for 71% of global emissions, or the US military, which is one of the largest polluters in history. Yes, you should recycle, but the real problem is a structural one that must be dismantled, instead of blaming individual disabled people for the ice caps melting.
I think, well, as far as misconceptions with sort of how the system works and people that are affected that we deal with or that are incarcerated in general, I have a lengthy list of things that I think people don't understand, or that there's social misinformation on, or that simply people aren't acquainted with the criminal justice system, which is a good thing. But I think things that would surprise people are 1 in 3 Americans have a criminal history. 95% of the people who are becoming incarcerated, and this is in Oregon, will be released. So this out of sight, out of mind outlook doesn't apply. I mean, it's kind of the throw away the key. But what people don't grasp is that most people, 95%, are coming back out, and they're going to be neighbors and patrons and employees and parents of the kids who are your kids' classmates. So what sort of setup do we want? To continue punishing them doesn't help us. If you want to get really selfish about it, that's not improving the fabric of our own communities. But I think people just don't understand that number, and that's an overwhelmingly large number. I don't think people understand that the most serious offenders are the least likely to recidivate. And recidivism is the likelihood to reoffend, and that's measured various different directions. But they are the least likely to recidivate, yet they are the most feared individuals upon release. I think people don't know that youth who are locked up as juveniles, that if their sentence, or whatever it is, extends beyond their 25th birthday, they will get turned over to the DOC, to the Department of Corrections, to adult prisons. And they will be walking out of a very therapeutic environment into a, well, let's just say far less therapeutic environment to serve out the rest of their sentence. I don't think people understand that they pay fees to be supervised, being on probation after release. And that if they can't keep up with their fees while they're getting a job, that they can be brought in front of the court for contempt, for non-compliance. And then when you get a contempt, it's less likely you can get a job to pay your fees, which you have to keep going to probation, incurring fees that you then can't pay. And it cycles and spirals down and down and down. I don't think people understand that arrests that never amounted to a charge can still interfere with getting a job or an apartment if they're looked at the wrong way by the individuals who are like an employer and landlord. And I say wrong way because they don't know how to look at them in the right way. And which brings the point up to what is an arrest, what is a charge, and what is a conviction. And I don't think that the general population could probably define those. And let's just say that an arrest is if you got picked up and taken in or cited for something. We have the Constitution, we're presumed innocent. You don't know which direction that's going to go, but that's just an arrest. It doesn't mean you've ever been charged with anything. Maybe you never will be charged with anything, but it certainly is a far, far, far cry from a conviction. So then a smaller portion of the arrests are actually charged, meaning they've got enough information, they've done enough investigation that they go ahead and charge a crime. The district attorney's office does. So there's a charge, but then it's even a smaller portion of those charges that are actually going to end up in convictions at trial or a plea agreement, which is a conviction on the record. So think of it as a funnel going downwards, whereas an arrest is, we don't know. Nobody knows. We had an arrest because something was going on and we need to look more into it. Well, those dings on a record, and they may never be charged. They may never go anywhere. They can still affect people. I had a client I was working with on an expungement, and she had an arrest on a municipal court, not even a circuit court, but a municipal court offense that was 12, 15 years old. And it was interfering in her getting caretaker positions. It was an arrest, never charged. So I think those are just some of the misconceptions there that would surprise people. That we think that, for instance, sex offenders get treated while they're in prison. They don't get treatment. There's some classes and things like that they can take, but they're not getting highly credentialed treatment while they're in. They're supposed to do that when they get out, and they're supposed to pay for it when they get out. Well, they don't have a job or are getting a job. And again, here's yet another spiral that moves out. So there's just so much misinformation, and then there's an equal amount of just lack of information. People are very prone to looking close to home. If you asked them, about this system and they're kind of apart from it, well, I've never been, but I have found, and I can say this for my own family, that they would say, oh, no, this hasn't affected whatever. And yet I can reach out just in a fairly close family radius and say, well, there are people who have had, let's say, criminal justice experience. And so it's closer than people think off the top of their head. Okay? They react one way. But again, when we're looking at an actual number of 1 in 3, it's closer to home than most people admit. But it's not pleasant to look at. So I understand why people sort of avert their eyes. In the state of Oregon, the most recent numbers, and these aren't to say that they are new by any means, but the most recent numbers floating around are that about 700 people a month are released in Oregon from incarceration. And on the year in Marion County, where we're at, that's over 400 a year just in the Marion County community alone. So it really is right here, within arm's reach. And it's an overlooked and underserved population.
Something that you mentioned that I wasn't aware of is the existence of probation fees. And I think that really speaks to the structural inequality and criminalization of poverty that puts people in prison. And the system continues that cycle of violence by incarcerating people for something out of their control and continues to punish them for it with things like fees. Instead of taking money out of the prison industrial complex to begin with, putting it into social services such as housing or mental health resources or food support. It's an intentional system of harm that targets marginalized communities. So on that note, I was wondering if you could speak on the demographics of the legal clinic's clients.
Yeah, I would. And I don't have specifics on the demographics. And when we know far and wide that the numbers, it's racially disparate, that we certainly have sort of, to your point of the probation, that's sort of criminalizing poverty. You can put two arrests side by side, and we statistically know that there's a racial component to who gets charged and with what. So the disparate impact is there. 25% of the people incarcerated on the planet are incarcerated in the United States, whereas the United States only has 4.8%, 4.25% of the global population. Yet we have 25% of the global incarcerated population. So if you take the disparate impact and sort of ratchet it up along those lines, it's a big problem. And it does serve to widen the gap. And I hate using this term, but keep people in their place. It's an ugly reality. And I certainly hope that there's social momentum, we could hope, of the last few years moving in a better direction.
Following that, what are some of the biggest misconceptions you come across regarding the community members you serve?
I think some of the biggest misconceptions about individuals returning to the community are some of the points, actually, that I will double down on some things I've already mentioned. The majority don't reoffend. The most serious are even less likely to reoffend, and that reentry services actually make a difference. And by that, I'll refer to wraparound services such as the Communities Reentry Resource Center. And that could be housing, food, employment, shoes, clothes, all the things to sort of just the really bare necessities, getting things lined up when they come out. And the legal clinic, so we provide legal clinic services to the Reentry Resource Center, and we're just a small part of the pie. The people coming back out, we know that investments, the research in Oregon, the investments in for every dollar spent on reentry resources turned about a $12 to $14 return on investment, meaning reducing victim costs, saving recidivism costs, and all that 3 years down the road. So that's not just prudent investing. I mean, that's a social and economic windfall. And I think that that is not known, that we actually can put things in place to help people reintegrate successfully.
So is your work in tandem with the Resource Center as a kind of legal go-between? How, on a practical case-by-case basis, does your work together pan out?
I think to that, to just kind of give you an idea of how we interface. The Reentry Resource Center, where, as I said before, the legal clinic is a standalone nonprofit now. So we donate the legal clinic aspects of the Communities Reentry Resource Center services. So if you had a housing issue, it may be two things. Maybe they need housing, in which case the Resource Center has housing navigators that help people find housing and get, applications, and in with the organizations that can facilitate that and have listings and all of that. Now, a housing problem that might come our way might be if an individual has a landlord-tenant problem. And we've had that. And we've had it could be a landlord issue. It could be a tenant issue. Sometimes you have to tell tenants, yeah, you can't do that. And here's how we might help them sort of smooth the waters, and we might facilitate their way out of a discussion with a landlord, because maybe there's some knowledge to be gained. Maybe there's information they didn't have. But more likely, in our experience, has been that sometimes landlords know that tenants who with criminal history do not have an easy road to hoe finding housing. So letting things slip, or letting habitability issues go, or treating them in a certain way, or making them responsible for things that they can't really be responsible for under the landlord-tenant law. They know that these are people often just want to keep their head down. And we've had clients come in who describe things and they're like, I just don't want to say anything. I finally have a place to live. I'll live anywhere. And it's like, yeah, but under the law, you can't. That's the landlord-tenant law. It's not okay. So we can sometimes help, ease them through those situations. And sometimes it is facilitating with the landlord directly. Maybe there's something workable. And sometimes it's how do you leave that situation in a reasonable standing so that you can then go find another place to rent or live. So that's kind of how that might be, where you have one issue that could fall on either side. Our appointments come through the Resource Center, but we don't, and we may refer people back to all the other services there, but we don't run or influence any of their other services directly.
What is the biggest barrier people face upon reentry? Is it finding housing? Is it finding employment?
It is. And I'll say, so for the legal clinic, for that question, the breakdown of services we provide, it's about 45% would be what we call quasi-criminal, which would be expungements or set aside, having something removed from your record. It might be a charge reduction. It might be relief from registry, or we have done juvenile clemency petitions, parole board reviews. On that end, about 35% falls into the family law portion. So people often reunifying or need to modify a custody or establish a custody that was never established before they went in. Guardianships. A lot of people reverse guardianships when they get out so they can be back with their kids, that sort of thing. And then the balance is just ran up, could be landlord tenant, could be debt related issues. Again, we're just miscellaneous civil stuffs. So what is the biggest need when they come out? That one, I'm going to say that the housing and employment issues are straight up number one. And then there's lots of things like people need to get on Oregon Health Plan, or they need to get a driver's license back because they come out without ID and that. So There's all sorts of little necessities that we kind of take for granted. They might need a bus pass. Most come out without transportation and they just need to get around. And the Resource Center actually has bus passes and does classes and things like that help them learn to advocate for themselves and learn to better communicate and apply for jobs and interview.
A few minutes ago, you kind of mentioned changing social and cultural understandings of incarceration. Do you see that situation improving as more employers might be more aware of these kind of structural issues, or is it kind of the same in terms of the past, especially since you said that you've been doing this since 2013? Has it kind of stayed the same?
I would like to say that it's improving on the awareness level for employers. There certainly are the things that people hear about or read about in the paper, here on the news, is the ban the box sort of things where they don't have to tick the box on a job application that they have a felony anymore, and that they would have to figure those things out down the line, because not every conviction might be relevant to every job position people are looking for. So it keeps some of those doors open. I think most people on the inside kind of shrug at ban the box and say, it's good, it puts it on the radar, it keeps you moving in the right direction, but it is certainly not something to hang our hat on, because it doesn't work as thoroughly or comprehensively as anyone would have liked. And so there's that it's bringing, and I think getting things conversational is huge, of course. So to keep things moving, hopefully there's some really big employers out there that make this splash, and that it is spreading that regard. Dave's Killer Bread is they're just known as being at the absolute forefront of this. And Dave had a criminal history and started this company and employs individuals with arrests and convictions. And they are a mainstream, really well situated, popular and profitable company. So they put it out there. And then there's other individuals who take note of that and know that they don't have to reinvent the wheel, that there's some people already doing it. How did they do it? How did they screen? How did that come under their liability policies? There's a lot to think about. I mean, it's certainly multi-layered for employers, but there are ways to get it done for those willing to take a few minutes to do it. And that there is a big need for employees, and that there's always this human capital in the community. One frustration that plays in here is there's something that we call there's no true expungement. People think, well, you can get that off your record for certain eligible arrests, convictions. You can get those things removed from your record after a certain amount of time, and if certain other criteria are met. However, you might, and if you're going to go apply for a public job, meaning for a state agency or a state licensed field or something, perhaps that would help you. However, we can thank the advent of the internet that this may be removed on a state level from the official agencies. But as anybody who's popped around, Googled around looking for someone somewhere, those mugshots and criminal histories never go away. So if you think about all private sector employers or landlords or whoever, who knows what background checks they're pulling. I mean, you can go online, they're infinite, $2.99, $19.99, wherever, and they are not regulated. They exist in the ether. They offshore, they disappear and appear elsewhere. Imagine this, you get your record set aside officially by the state, gone, erased, expunged, which means you are deemed that for that not to have happened. That is what the state says. Then you go to apply for a job, or you go to a landlord who pulls this $8.99 background check, and this comes up. Suddenly we have a credibility issue. And that's where the problem comes up, because then it's not that you necessarily find out about that. You just don't get the call back. You don't get the second, because they assume there's a credibility issue. Whereas you're holding in your hand all your documents that deem, according to the state, this never to have happened. So no true expungement is highly problematic, and people don't understand that, and employers don't understand that. Are they becoming enlightened? I hope so. I think there is some momentum moving in this direction. And certainly the Resource Center has employment navigator there who interface with what we call friendly employers wherever they can. I mean, that's Madison Caniglio's whole job, is to interact and interface and develop those rapports and relationships. And there are other organizations out there doing those things also to some extent, or employers who are known that, or some temp agencies, employment agencies who specifically know how to sort things out and find people who are still appropriate for positions regardless of their background. So it's moving, not fast enough for any of us, but hopefully at least in the right direction.
I think this work is really important because it addresses and hopefully takes away the fear of what incarceration means in terms of prejudice around who is incarcerated and why. and then hopefully, turning away from the carceral system entirely and becoming more compassionate and empathetic towards one another.
To that end, I mean, I suppose if I ask, because I think, they on the empathy side is that we're not going, there isn't just tough on crime and soft on crime. There is smart on crime. And that while we might not charge for our services, our clients would be the first to tell you they're not, air quotes here, free, because we expect a lot from these individuals. So they're not just getting a pass. They're having to take ownership of their own progress and rehabilitation and advancements. And that is huge. They're coming out and we're expecting them to become, better adjusted humans. These aren't handouts by a long shot. And I think that that's a important thing to put out there, that it is empathetic, but it's no handout.
I want to pause for a moment and clarify that while Kimberly was referring to how the de Muniz Legal Clinic functions in a way that provides guidance alongside the aid, rather than just the aid without instructions, it is important to dig into the social significance of the term free handouts, since it's often wielded by conservatives as a weapon against providing resources for those deemed unworthy, which translates to those most marginalized. But why do we as a society view handouts as such a bad thing? The prison industrial complex is extremely abusive, traumatizing, and intentionally harmful. Why shouldn't we want to do everything we can to support someone who has survived that, regardless of worth? One of the reasons ableism persists is that it's structurally built into our economic system, as disabled people are not able to be exploitable workers with profits made off of our labor. Much like incarcerated people, we are also considered disposable and lacking value, and by extension, not worthy of handouts. The government gives handouts to rich people all the time, but never the lower classes, because for a variety of reasons, racism, ableism, xenophobia, we are not deemed worthy of what handouts ultimately should be, which is the compassionate sharing of resources to those in need, regardless of who you are. Those who fear handouts believe that in giving to others, we ourselves have less. But the issue is one of the 1% hoarding resources. If wealth, land, and housing were redistributed equally, poverty, homelessness, and world hunger could easily be eradicated. If the government and/or social projects took care of people from the beginning, no matter what, the PIC wouldn't exist. So to create barriers or moral judgment around help after harm has already been done to these individuals quickly becomes a way to extend control over people, even once they are supposedly outside of the system. You inherently deserve care. You shouldn't have to earn it. What would you say is your biggest day-to-day struggle with the legal clinic, or something you wish more people knew about your work?
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful if more people, if they knew about all of this. So I think knowing about it, because I think then you start to process where, the implications of that might fall. So just the level of consciousness make certain things a little more sensical to people. It kind of humanizes that and puts it in perspective that we're all community members. As far as the struggles in the day-to-day work, I mean, right off the bat, I would say funding and admin. Admin is not my deal. I'm trying to be an attorney, and we, again, are a very small shop. So I'm trying to lawyer things. I also have private practice in Salem in family law. So there's irons in the fire in every direction. So those things really are my struggles. And that the funding, we are privately funded and we are a niche. So our grants, we've written for some grants. We'll be writing for grants again, but it's kind of a tough and small niche. And grant writers are very expensive. So that's yet another thing we sort of cobble together. One of our board members and really generous donors calls us a cheap date, because we really are a small shop and we really do run frugally, much like my own life, and are not a big budget place. But still, it still costs money, and that's all in labor for those of us doing the work. So it's not being spent on, there aren't really any extravagances. Beauty of going digital is that we don't even have to have space and place and papers and all of that anymore. So we cut down any way we can. Those, I'd say, are my struggles. As far as the political front, where there are bills and that sort of thing going on, we're not particularly politically involved. I gave testimony, I forget which bill back, it's been several years, and that there are some things going on, such as the marijuana expungement. There's a move to make some automatic expungement of marijuana offenses since that's been decriminalized. So some of that is in the pipe. It's not there yet. There are people working on that. There are people working on the 10 to the non-unanimous juries issues and that. But as far as how these directly affect our clients, certainly any sort of automatic expungement, whether it's marijuana or otherwise, that would be great. There are states that have some automation of their set-aside process. So it's doable and it's a lot less cumbersome. It's also very expensive right now for individuals, $281 per charging instrument, plus an $80 check for the background check. So you're over $350 per offense for people who are struggling to be fully employed. And that it's substantial.
How can people support your clinic and learn more about your work?
Well, they can certainly learn more by going to our website. So either DeMunisLegal.org or DeMunisLegalClinic.org. And we are a Amazon Smile recipient. So instead of shopping all day on Amazon, you can actually go to Smile, whether it's Smile Amazon or Amazon Smile now, I forget, but it's the exact same menu of great Amazon items. And the only difference is that when you purchase there at no additional cost to the purchaser, a tiny portion is funneled to the DeMunis Legal Clinic. So all you do is you decide on the charity you would like to hook up to your Amazon Smile account. So that's one way to help. You can go to the website. There's also donate buttons there. We have subscription buttons, even if $10 a month on a subscription, that's just automatically deducted. You can set those up and every little bit helps. And then I'm always excited to speak, present, keynote, group, club, organization, departments, conference, retreat. Any way we can get the word out and make this more conversational, then we're headed in the right direction. And there's a lot of fear, I think, in the general public when they're talking about things and why we're tough on crime and all that. I get it. But the more you know, and the more you understand how a criminal history, keyword being history, plays into the whole, and what second chances really are, and what reentry means, and what recidivism isn't, then the less fear we have, the more welcoming we are. And that's just good for everybody.
If you're interested in learning more about the issues that branch from incarceration, this episode's recommended book is Prisons Make Us Safer and 20 Other Myths About Mass Incarceration by Victoria Law. The link to purchase this book can be found in the episode description, or check it out and support your local library. Thanks again to April Cox and Kimberly Mansfield for speaking with me. This has been Voices in Action, a podcast brought to you by EOSIL. Stay informed, stay safe, and remember, community care, not cops, keeps us safe.